Well, let's now cross live to Jos, where we can speak to the Governor of Plateau State, SIMON LALONG. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the program. Well, we have seen assurances and all of that with President Muhammadu Buhari vowing that those who carried out this dastardly act will be shown no mercy. And even you say that the Plateau will never be home to terrorists. But can you actually give us an idea as to the root cause of not just these killings, but the ones that we have seen, especially in recent times? What are the intelligence authorities telling you?
Well, thank you very much. I am not only concerned about Plateau, but also as chairman of the Northern Governors Forum. And these things are happening almost in around some parts of the north. You recall that there has been massive attack, especially on the terrorists around the northwest. It started with the northeast, and now a heavy bombardment by the military at the northwest. Now we were also afraid, those of us around the north central, that the impact of this is that if they escape from that place, they will be moving towards our area. We are already beginning to have a meeting to prepare on a synergy to ensure that we protect our borders when this one happened. I can tell you that the day it happened, it's like there was a leak of information, because our team was going to carry out a raid the next day. And then eventually we heard that they were already attacking some local governments at the border of Plateau, Taraba, the border between Plateau and Bauchi. They were already carrying out the attack. And because of the terrain, it's a very, very difficult terrain, because we have a very much unoccupied land that are around that place. And incidentally, that is also the place where we carve out for our pilot ranching. And thirdly, is an area where there is heavy settlement, I will say, of discovery of mining, of minerals, mineral resources, solid minerals. So the idea of solid mineral deposit, the idea of the fact that Plateau is already concentrating on the issue of ranching, that is our pilot ranching around there, was also very attractive, perhaps, to some of these bandits that were moving around. So before we carried out our own raid, they were very fast to carry out that attack. And by the time we sent out military, by the time the president also, the service chief directed the military to move into that place. When they got in, a lot of damage was already done. Because to imagine about 70, because that's the picture they gave, about 70 of them on motorcycles, and each of them carrying AK-47, and destroying all those villages, very innocent villages, children and women, and running up and down. By the time they got there, they had already done a lot of damages to those places. But however, I must also comment, because when the military got there, they all ran away. So we're trying to get the report to find out some of the casualties that we had. And also, in order to keep peace, I didn't want to waste time. I drove to Kanam, I drove to Wasay to give them assurance that yes, it happened. Unfortunately, we take responsibility. I would say take responsibility, because I will say the governor, administration, to me, an omission. And when this thing happened, we will not take it lightly, because we've been doing our best to protect our people, and those people also know that we've been doing our best. On their own side, they also believe and know that they've been living in peace. Wasay and Kanam is one area that I've enjoyed serious peace during my tenure. And so I had to go there to look at what was happening, to also look at how to give them assurance that the military, the government will continue to protect them.
Indeed. Mr. Governor, we do commiserate with the people of your state, especially families that have lost loved ones in these needless attacks. But it's difficult to keep count of how many assurances you have given and orders you have given to security people and vying to keep your state safe. Would you say you're overwhelmed? And you said before the security agencies arrived to these communities, the attackers had run away. Are you saying there had been no arrest and no prosecution at the moment? But really, are you overwhelmed, Mr. Governor?
Well, in terms of security, I will not really say I'm overwhelmed because I have been working with the security. I've been working with the security. So if we say for this reason, we may say we are overwhelmed, but not totally overwhelmed. In Plateau State, we have Operation Rainbow. In Plateau State, we have the Army. We have Operation Safe Haven. We have the police. We have the vigilante. And we have community. We have introduced community policing. So all these things are efforts towards addressing the security of the state. For me, you know, some of these bandits, I wouldn't even say bandits, terrorists, they move like thieves. A thief cannot come to your house when he knows you are awake. He will make sure that he will make sure that you are asleep. Then he will sneak in, cause havoc, and run away. These are some of the instances where our attention are on other places, and they sneak into where we have very relative peace, and then they will cause this havoc. Otherwise, those are places that, yes, like I mentioned, heavy deposit of mineral resources. There are places that we are anticipating that those are areas that we are going to also develop to increase our revenue in the state. And so for something to happen is really surprising to us. And so it's another way of drawing our attention that we must, in the process of trying to ensure peace, be sure that we don't leave any area without proper protection.
Well, Mr. Governor, it's beyond Wase and Kanam, because I know that before this incident, there was that incident in Irigwe talking about Abasa where lives were lost just days before then. But you know what, Mr. Governor, my question to you is, what happened to the Plateau? Because Plateau used to be that very peaceful state in Nigeria that even growing up as a child here and myself in Nigeria, that was my dream place to go, the same way people go all the way to the US and the rest. What happened to the Plateau?
Well, if you ask that question, you are asking me to give account of what happened in the last 20 years in Plateau State. I was a speaker in Plateau State. The first incident that happened, as far as I was concerned, was about an election which went into a religious crisis. After that, for a while, another regime came on board. And that was the last regime that came under Governor Jang. Under Governor Jang, I will tell you that 8 years of serious crisis in Plateau State. And it was a very serious magnitude. So when I came on board, looking at some of these problems here and there, we were able to address the situation. That time, we stayed in peace here in Plateau State. Peace was really coming back, because some of the measures that were not introduced in the state, we did it. We made sure that there was fairness, there was injustice, the injustices that were perpetrated in Plateau State were all addressed. In trying to consolidate on that, we introduced the Peace Building Agency. We passed a law for Peace Building Agency, which was now responsible for addressing some of these conflicts here and there. The Operation Rainbow is there. Operation Rainbow to us is like a state police. It's like state police. It's a combination of police and then the civil defense and even the private security combined together under the state. That one under the control of the state in liaison with the Commissioner of Police. In addition to that, I also introduced what we call interreligious council. I realized that part of it is that the slightest thing you have in Plateau, it gets into a religious conflict. And so in order to address that, I introduced interreligious council. About 50 clerics, both Muslim and Christians, all the religious organizations were part of this organization. So for a very long time, we had a very relative peace on the Plateau. Because the next thing we started seeing, after addressing the issue of farmers' herdsmen, because after that the political conflict was what we realized as farmers' herdsmen. We addressed farmers' herdsmen, but part of what we are seeing in the country, part of what we are seeing in the north, in the far north, is what is now bringing back some of what I am seeing. The dimension I'm seeing now is no longer issue of farmers' herdsmen, but the banditry, the terrorists moving from one area, destroying a part in the night and running away and disappearing all over. We were very mindful that what was happening in the northwest was likely going to also extend to the north central, to part of the north central, especially within this period that people are now preparing to clear their farms to go back to farms. Majority of our people are farmers. And so any attempt to disturb them that they're doing is like attacking them, attacking their source of livelihood, and so sending them to early grave. So we try to do that to protect the people until when we had what happened, because the one in Bassa was also an extension of what we had of farmers' herdsmen, which we are already correcting. I was in Bassa yesterday. We had a very fruitful with Bassa people, very at the point where they also signed an agreement, just like we did when I came into office, when it was the issue of Birom and Fulani. We signed a document like that, and we started implementing the document. Also, for a long time, we didn't have much of that conflict again. In Bassa, the farmers' herdsmen continued lingering, and up to a point where they now agreed to sign an agreement. I was there yesterday to assure them that we are going to implement the agreement to the latter, just like we did in other places. So, but what happened in Kanam is not,
go ahead, Mr. Governor.
It's not really what I will say.
It's
not what I would call farmers' herdsmen. It was a case of banditry, terrorists attacking the people. From nowhere, terrorists just attacking the people, destroying farmlands, cutting away their livestock, and then destroying houses and killing people, disappearing within a twinkle of an eye.
And bandits have been declared terrorists in Nigeria anyways. Mr. Governor, some people will say you cannot talk about peace with the absence of justice. In all of this, we wonder what's been the prosecution. Has anybody, any group been brought to justice for all of this? But that's a question you should ponder on. I really want to ask you what you have to say to those who say the billions of naira being, set aside for security votes is no longer justifiable with the level of insecurity we see in a state such as yours. What do you tell people like that? And I do also know that you were at this at the meeting of the National Council of State yesterday. What did you tell the council? And are you getting any further help in your state from the federal government?
Well, I told the council clearly that what we prepared, and which was also something we discussed with the president, at the level of the Northern Governors Forum, we had what we call the frontline states. And in these frontline states, we enumerated certain problems that we needed to also sit with the security organizations. Some things that we believe that if they were done will also help us in addressing some of these issues that we have in our various states. We did that after a meeting with Mr. President. Mr. President directed that we have a meeting with the security organization. We had that meeting, but unfortunately, I think shortly after, the Chief of Army Staff had that accident and he died. May he so rest in peace. So after that, it was a while to have another meeting again. So some of these measures that were put on ground was what I asked. What is delaying the implementation of some of these things? Because those issues are peculiar. Those issues affect security aspects that are peculiar to us in the north, especially addressing issues of farmers, herdsmen, addressing issues of unoccupied spaces, because we have very large portions of land. We have forest areas that are not occupied by people. We want to see the effort to address and occupy the unoccupied spaces, to occupy those spaces, even if it is not for economic, but then make sure that we don't provide hideouts for criminals. Because it is when we leave those places unoccupied that criminals take advantage of them. And by the time they move in, taking them away from it is always very difficult. It's just like what we saw, like I said, in Kanam. They are moving on their ways. They settle there. They will come and say, we are settled here. The people will also resist and say, no, this land does not belong to you. Leave that land. And in the process, there are conflict. And within a short period of time, this level of destruction that is done to our people. Appreciating also that Nigerians have right to live everywhere. But we must be very careful on those kind of people that are moving here and there so that we address this issue of insecurity once and for all. So when you ask that question, I raised it with Mr. President, and Mr. President also directed that we have a meeting with him as quickly as possible. And I saw even from the invitation that he has also convened as a result of what we discussed 2 days ago at the Council of State. He also convened a meeting of the National Security Council to address some of these issues because we are into the rainy season and it is going to be very, very dangerous for us in the north, especially for our people who are now preparing to move back to their farms, for people who are displaced and to know where they are going back, how they are going back, and the level of protection that the security will give to them.
Right. Well, it's not just dangerous for your people because food security is a concern for everyone because we know that Plateau State is an agrarian state. But since you talked about Mr. President, remember he had actually said that every governor in the country has to take responsibility for the security of their people. And even your fellow governor, Yahaya Bello, says, you know what, the role as chief security officer of your state lies in your hands. And one really wonders, I want to get your take on your role as the chief security officer on your state. And also, you talked about land being, the reason why we're seeing all of these killings. I know that a lot of committees had been set up and reconciliation committees as well. And even some white paper had come out of such committees, which one of them you had mentioned earlier. And I do remember the late Justice Nikki Toby had released a white paper of his own committee. But what are some of those concrete measures that you have taken out of all of this, committees that had been set up in the years leading to today to find a lasting solution?
Well, I told you that some of these committees were even set up when I was the Speaker of the House of Assembly. I happen to be one of the longest speakers in the House of Assembly, almost 7 years. And within that time, we also had crisis. That was when the Nikki Toby report was set up, or the Nikki Toby report, the Nikki Toby commission came up. There were so many other commissions that came up. Even when we came on board, people were saying, okay, set up commissions, set up commissions. What I said is that I know many of these reports, of recommendations of some of these reports, and some of them mostly had to do with injustice. Some of them had to do with unfairness. Some of them had to do with building the confidence of people to accept that we must live together. The religious factor notwithstanding, the ethnic factor notwithstanding. So we carried out several measures. I've told you how we settled the conflict, the lingering conflict between the Biroms and the Fulanis, which the previous government was not able to do. Within 3 months, we were able to settle them. And we carried out some measures that were seen as injustice in the country. Before that, some parts of Plateau were even no-go areas. You dare not move to another area until you change your dressing, until you change, you tell them lies about your religion. But after a very long time, we had peace on the Plateau. Now, the last one that came was when we were almost getting to doing an election. These are also periods when you see Plateau people moving towards an election, especially local government election. You will see spurts of conflict here and there, which sometimes will result in killings. We had the Bassa conflict at that time. We were able to again resolve the conflict, although unfortunately a lot of lives we lost lots of lives in Plateau. After the Bassa conflict, we had an election and we went into another major election. Now today, what we are seeing, as I told you, is that if you come to Plateau, Plateau is very peaceful. If you come to the state, you will know that some of these things are happening. But then we must also focus and address the border areas. The Bassa problem, most of it happens around the border between Plateau and Kaduna State. Now we are also seeing a lot of danger within the border of Plateau and Bauchi State. And then, of course, between Plateau and Taraba State. So you will work out your own, you will protect your own, but some of these conflicts, just like when we were addressing and doing the issue of COVID that time, when you finish and you address your own, some people will enter from other states with it. And so this is what we are saying. If another state is not doing exactly what you are doing, it's always very difficult. And that is why we have done that at the level of the Northern Governors Forum, agreed to have a synergy where if we are protecting a border in Plateau, the same principle will also apply in Bauchi, apply in Taraba. Otherwise, you sit down, you think that you have done everything, and then you see influx of these bandits or terrorists, so to speak, moving from one area to the other. And sometimes it's very, very difficult because by the time they move, you don't know when they are moving, and then they come and strike, and you are chasing them, you may not get them.
And, Mr. Governor, you've made mention of solid minerals twice in this conversation. Are you insinuating that perhaps illegal mining is also attributing to the security situation in your state? Very quickly, Mr. Governor.
Well, you have seen what is happening in Zamfara. You have seen what is happening mostly in the northwest. And most of them, those areas, are areas where they pretend that they are there because of those solid minerals. Now, those areas are now occupied by the military. So you see movements from one area to the other. So that's why perhaps they are moving around the north for areas where they will see minerals. For our own case, I said this because I was there in those local governments today, and I realized that many of those areas, villages that were destroyed, were villages within even those areas that we had a lot of deposit of our minerals waiting to be exploited. And then also, that is the area where we believe we are going to do our pilot ranching. That is the pilot ranching in Plateau State. So I will say that yes, perhaps they are moving in to come and stay there because they want to take advantage of the mineral resources. They are also staying there because they are looking for hideouts.
Well, we can only hope that peace returns to the Plateau and the people remain safe. Thank you so much, Governor Simon Lalong of Plateau State, North Central Nigeria.